Hey, welcome everyone. We'll start momentarily. Just give people a minute to log in. All right, we can get started. Hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Sajila Munir, and I am the Outreach and Partnerships Manager at the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, or ISPU. I'm grateful to have you all join us today and for our esteemed panelists who are joining us in this conversation today about Muslim converts. So we will be highlighting today some new research that's coming out of ISPU. We'll be spotlighting how converts navigate Islamophobia, family dynamics, education, and community life, and how their presence challenges misconceptions about what it means to be Muslim in the US. If we go to the next slide. Okay, so just a brief agenda of what we'll be going through. We'll start with a little bit about ISPU, and then we'll go into the presentation of our research, followed by a panel discussion and audience Q&A. So just for those of us that are joining us for the first time, I'll begin with a little bit of background about ISPU and about our work. So ISPU has been around for more than 20 years, conducting rigorous research on and for American Muslims to support well-informed dialogue and decision-making. We are a nonpartisan, non-religious, nonprofit organization, and at ISPU, we envision an America where Muslims are thriving and equal. And our mission is to provide objective research and education. So, a little bit about our research. At ISPU, our research is designed to be both rigorous and relevant. That means we apply high standards of academic integrity while also ensuring that our work is accessible, actionable, and directly responsive to the needs of American Muslim communities. Our research is solution seeking, so we don't just describe challenges, we explore what can be done to address them, whether it's barriers to mental health, whether it is discrimination in schools or civic engagement. We aim to offer insights that lead to tangible change. We are Muslim community focused, meaning our work is grounded in the lived experiences, voices, and priorities of American Muslims. At the same time, we maintain strong connections to academic, national, and local networks. So, bridging that gap between scholarship, policy, and grassroots action. Our research is organized around 5 key focus areas, the first being family and wellness, where we examine everything from caregiving to mental health to parenting. The second is community, which includes topics like Islamophobia, safety, and identity. The third is capacity building. So that means supporting institutions like Islamic schools and mosques with research backed tools and insights. And then we have American pluralism, where we explore interfaith dynamics, perceptions of Muslims, and challenges to inclusive democracy. And finally, American Muslim contributions, where we uplift the positive impacts Muslims have made on US culture, society, and civic life. So through this work, ISPU serves as sort of a trusted source of data and analysis for community leaders, policymakers, educators, and journalists alike. So today's research comes from our American Muslim poll. The American Muslim poll examines the attitudes of American faith groups on various topics, from politics and religion to violence and identity. This can include hot button and evolving issues such as abortion, banking, and gun control. So it is my honor today to welcome Dalia Mogahid, who will be taking us through some of this data on American Muslim converts. Dalia is an ISPU scholar and the co-author of this analysis. She is also the former director of research at ISPU, where she led the organization's pioneering research and thought leadership programs on American Muslims. She is also the former executive director for the Gallup Center for Muslim Studies. She led the analysis of surveys of Muslim communities worldwide. She is a frequent expert commentator in global media outlets and international forums. So before I hand it over to Dalia, just a couple of reminders. The chat will be open to engage in conversation related to today's topic. So please go ahead and share where are you joining us from, what type of work it is you do, and what drew you to this topic. Secondly, the Q&A box is available, so please direct any questions for any of the panelists to the Q&A box so we can keep track of them and for the Q&A section at the end of this webinar. All right, so without further ado, I welcome Dalia to share this data with us.
Thank you so much, Sajila. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. Very nice to be in conversation with you about such an important topic. Before we jump into the results of the study, I want to give you a little bit of background on the American Muslim poll. Our poll methodology document is online and can be referenced for a lot more detail. But just to give you some of the most important points, we did a nationally representative sample of Muslims, Jews, Catholics, Protestants, within Protestants, white evangelicals, as well as non-affiliated Americans. That survey was conducted in 2022 between February and March, and you can learn a lot more about it and read more of the results at ispu.org/poll. This is a reflection of our advisors. We really pulled from the top talent in the US on American Muslims and on polling, so you probably recognize a few of these faces. Before we jump into specifically research on Muslims who chose Islam as adults after growing up in a different religion or no religion, I want to give you a little bit of demographic context as to who American Muslims are in terms of their demographic background. Muslims are the most racially and ethnically diverse religious group in America. There is roughly equal percentages of Muslims who identify as Black, and that's around 27%, and those who identify as white at 28%. 18% identify as Asian, just 12% as Arab, 8% as Hispanic or Latino, and then 1% as as Native American, and then 5% as other, which could be mixed race or just another group, another identification that isn't listed in these groups. The other thing that distinguishes Muslims from other faith communities is their average age. Muslims are by far the youngest religious group in America, where 26% are between the ages of 18 and 24. And you can see how that compares to other faith communities. Muslims are 4 to 6 times as likely to be young. And there are a lot of implications for that demographic reality. So now to jump into the topic of our conversation today. The American Muslim narrative is often defined by Arab and South Asian immigration, but this only tells one part of the story. Muslim converts, those Muslims who were raised in another religion or non-religious tradition, make up a significant segment of the American Muslim community, but are rarely included in media images of the community and even less often are researched empirically. This data sheds light on the community Islam has attracted in America. Using results from the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding's 2022 American Muslim poll. This research does not, however, include data on how long a convert has been a Muslim. Therefore, this piece is not focused on facts or experiences of new Muslims, but rather is focused on facts about Muslims who were raised in another religious or non-religious tradition, regardless of when they became a Muslim. And the full methodology, as I mentioned, is available online. So 10 facts about Muslims who embraced Islam later on in life. One is just the percentage of Muslims who are not raised Muslim is quite significant. 1 in 5 Muslims are converts. 1 in 5 Muslims were not raised in the faith. Most Muslim converts were raised Christian. So this is not surprising. Most Americans identify as Christian. But what you find is that 88% of Muslims who embraced Islam later in life and were not raised Muslim said that their faith that they were in fact raised in was Christian. 45% just say it was Christian, 28 say Protestant specifically, and 15% Catholic. 9%, however, also report being raised with no religion. This is interesting in general because Muslim converts were more likely to be raised Christian than the population of America today identifies as Christian. So people of faith are more likely to embrace Islam than people who were raised with no religion at all. There's some kind of urban myths about how many women versus men convert to Islam. I think I've heard people say that it's 4 to 1 women to men. That's not true. Muslim converts are equally likely to be men or women. Where people who convert to Islam or embrace Islam as adults are distinct, though, is half of Muslim converts are Black or African American. Now, when you consider that the general population of America is around 13% Black, this really is a striking finding where Islam has been a very important part of the African American experience. The other thing that I'll invite you to notice is that 17% of Muslim converts are Hispanic or identify as Hispanic or Latino. This is actually roughly the percentage of Hispanics in the population as a whole, which is around 19%. So there's sort of this parallel of the percentage of people who choose Islam reflect the percentage of people in the population as a whole. Where there is a much lower percentage in the convert pool as compared to the population as a whole is among white Muslims. 25% of converts are white, and that's in contrast to 75% of the population of America as a whole identifies as white. Now, born Muslims, you can also see how they differ. 22% of born Muslims identify as Black, 28% as white. 6% of born Muslims identify as Hispanic, and 23% as Asian, 15% as Arab. You notice also that Arab and Asian people are not represented in the convert pool at all, according to our research. The fifth kind of fact that we discovered is, on average, converts are older than Muslims raised in Islam. This is not entirely surprising because Americans in general are older than Muslims as a whole. Muslims tend to be a much younger faith population than the general public. So 11% of Muslim converts are between the ages of 18 to 24 compared to 30% of born Muslims. A quarter of Muslim converts are between the ages of 50 and 64 compared to 11% of born Muslims. Muslim converts and born Muslims are equally likely to be between the ages of 25 and 29 and 30 and 49, which is basically, you know, around the middle age bracket. Convert Muslims have lower levels of education on average. 15% of convert Muslims hold a bachelor's degree or higher, compared with 42% of born Muslims. And this is also reflected in average income. 44% of converts report a household income below $30,000, compared to 30% of people who are born in the faith. Politically, converts and born Muslims are very similar. So Muslims who embrace Islam later in life are more likely than born Muslims to be eligible to vote. That part is not surprising. But among eligible voters, they're very similar in their likelihood to be registered to vote, which is roughly 80% for both of them. And 71% of convert Muslims report facing no obstacles to voting, compared to 48% of born Muslims. So where they are the same is in their likelihood to be registered to vote if they're eligible. But where there's a stark difference is that Muslims who were born in the faith are more likely to report having faced some kind of obstacle to voting when they tried to cast their vote. Now, if you've read or heard some of our other presentations, you know that Muslims are the most likely faith community to report or to say that they had faced issues, obstacles when trying to cast their vote. Politically, though, convert Muslims and born Muslims are very similar. So 9% of convert Muslims and 11% of born Muslims report being Republican. This is, these are indistinguishable, basically. Roughly 10% of Muslims report being Republican. And as far as who's identifying as a Democrat, again, very similar numbers, 41% of convert Muslims and 48% of born Muslims. And then 40% of both groups report being independent. Religiously, very similar. Religiously, those who embrace Islam later in life and those who were raised in the faith are equally likely to say that religion is an important part of their daily life. 94 and 93%, so identical, and very, very high among the highest faith community. It's really Muslims and white evangelicals are the most likely to say their religion is important to them. Another similarity is the frequency by which both groups are saying that they attend religious service. So as far as once a week or more, it's identical, 42% and 41%. And you can see some of the other frequencies. The only place where people raised in the faith and people who embraced it later are slightly different are here, where they're reporting those who say that they attend the mosque seldom or less often than a few times a year. They're more likely to be converts. 22% versus 13%. But every other category, it's very, very similar. So mosque attendance is quite similar across the board. Now, when it comes to the experience of Islamophobia, as well as the internalization of Islamophobia, and what we mean by internalized Islamophobia is when a Muslim will actually endorse the anti-Muslim tropes that we use to measure Islamophobia in the public, and we also ask Muslims. So what we found is that people raised as Muslims are more likely to endorse anti-Muslim tropes than people who convert to Islam. So convert Muslims are more likely than born Muslims to disagree that most Muslims living in the US are more prone to violence than other people, for example. 83% of converts versus 60% of born Muslims disagree with that. You can see there's actually quite a sizable difference in rejecting this trope. Discrimination, the second one is regarding Muslims being discriminatory against women. 82% of converts versus 65% of born Muslims are disagree with that, reject this idea, are hostile to the US. Again, almost a 20% difference in how much they reject this trope. 83% of converts reject it, 65% of born Muslims reject it. And then the other two, the final two that we use, the other two questions that we use as a part of the Islamophobia Index, Muslims are less civilized than other people. Again, 80% of converts reject it, 66% of born Muslims do. And then finally, the question that measures the idea of collective blame, are partially responsible for acts of violence carried out by other Muslims. 80% of converts reject it, 66% of born Muslims. So there is a stark difference in how likely it is for people who chose Islam to internalize Islamophobia. They are much less likely to internalize Islamophobia than people who are raised in the faith. Number 9 is convert Muslims are also less likely than born Muslims to experience Islamophobia, to actually be targeted in, and this is all self-reported, but to have experienced being singled out as a Muslim for discrimination. So convert Muslims are more likely than born Muslims to say that they never experienced religious discrimination in the past year. So half of them said they never experienced it, whereas only 34% of people born and raised in the faith say that they've never experienced it. 18% of convert Muslims say, for example, that they've experienced religious discrimination at the airport compared to 49% of born Muslims. 23% of convert Muslims with school-aged children report having a child who faced religious-based bullying, and this compares to more than half, 55% of born Muslims. And it's an interesting finding in that we have found a strange and surprising link between experiencing Islamophobia and endorsing it yourself. We're still trying to fully understand this, but it is interesting that people who embrace Islam as adults are more likely both to not endorse, to reject Islamophobic ideas, and also to less likely to have experienced Islamophobia firsthand. And finally, number 10, convert Muslims are more likely than born Muslims to homeschool their kids, and they're less likely to be caring for an aging parent. And that might also be a reflection of their average age being older. 18% of convert Muslim parents homeschool at least one child compared to 3% of born Muslims. So it's a stark difference in how likely they are to homeschool. And then 17% of convert Muslims report caring for an aging adult compared to 40% of born Muslims. And again, this might also be explained by the fact that converts tend to be on average older, so they would be less likely to care for a parent themselves. So in conclusion, American Muslims, as I mentioned, are the most diverse religious community in America, and their pathway to the faith is just one way that they vary or, are diverse. However, what unites all Muslims, regardless of race, conversion, socioeconomic status, or partnership or partisanship, is a shared set of spiritual beliefs. Whether a Muslim was raised in the faith or embraced it later in life, Islam is an important part of their daily life and identity. And this applies to the vast majority. And for many, the mosque plays a central role. Muslim converts are as much a part of the American Muslim story as those raised in the faith and should be understood and represented accordingly.
Thank you so much, Dahlia. It was a wonderful sort of presentation of overview of sort of American Muslim converts, and it's very powerful to see a comprehensive picture of who American Muslim converts are and sort of the diversity that they bring to our communities. Before we move into our panel discussion, I'd love to ask you a quick question to help us reflect a bit more deeply on the framing of this work. So, in this research, we often use the word converts to describe Muslims who are not raised in the faith. However, in many community spaces, some individuals prefer alternative terms like reverts or first generation Muslims to better reflect their experiences, whether it's due to theological beliefs, cultural context, or just personal identity. Can you speak a little bit to the use of the term convert in the context of this research, and more broadly, how might the language that we use shape the way individuals are seen and included in the Muslim community?
Thank you so much for that question. And this question of the term that we should use is not settled in the American Muslim community. So I certainly understand why some people would might bristle even at the use of the word convert. The reason we chose this word, and this was something we thought about a lot and really put in a lot of consideration, is really two main things. One is that this study was conducted among people of other faiths as well. So as I mentioned in the beginning, when we were talking about the methodology, all of these other faith communities and non-faith communities got the same survey. So we are looking at religion switching across the board, not just among Muslims. So we needed a term that could be applied and be accurate across the board. The second reason that we chose convert, for example, over the word revert, is we were just taking our cues from thought leaders in the Muslim American community. So folks like Ubaidullah Evans, Ansa Tamara Gray, Imam Sohaib Webb, and others, when asked this question, said they actually prefer the term convert over revert. So I understand that it's a personal preference and there are reasons to go both ways. But we looked at Yaqeen Institute, which has a program which they call Convert Care, and it is the word convert. So we wanted to honor and respect the preference of some of these giants in our community and these thought leaders that we look to for advice, and so we landed on the word convert for the research.
Thank you so much, Dahlia. That's such an important layer to consider as we think about both the data and the lived reality of a lot of our communities. From here, I'm happy to introduce some of our wonderful panelists to help further make sense of some of this data. Our panelists today are some amazing people who do this work every day on the ground. I will introduce our panelists shortly with their bios, but their bios will also be shared in the chat. Our first panelist is Hazel Gomez, who is a faith-based community organizer and student of the Islamic sciences. She is a Puerto Rican and Mexican Muslim convert of nearly 20 years, hailing from Chicago's West Side and currently living in Detroit. Hazel's passion for studying Islam was heightened while at Al-Azhar University with a delegation of Latino and Latin American Muslim students, where they studied a myriad of the foundational Islamic sciences. As a faith-rooted community organizer for over a decade, the labor of love for her and her husband is Dream of Detroit. Striving to be a better community servant, Hazel also dedicates her time as a volunteer, advisor, and board member to various nonprofits, ranging from community development and Muslim convert care to anti-racism work and bill reform. Our second panelist is Nahila Morales, who is the co-founder of Embrace, a project of ICNA, an initiative created for reverts by reverts. Their mission is for reverts or converts to be embraced and treated with dignity, equality, and respect, and to become leaders within the Muslim community. She currently serves as the marketing director and brand ambassador. And lastly, we have Dr. Jihad Safir, who is the chair for the Department of Islamic Chaplaincy at Bayan Islamic Graduate School. He is also the resident imam and the founding executive director of Islah Academy, which is a K-8 Islamic private school based in Los Angeles. Through Dr. Safir's leadership, Islah LA has spawned a new wave of civic engagement within the Muslim American community. At Bayan, he teaches courses in Muslim adolescent identity formation, leadership development, and Islamic education. So, welcome all of you, and thank you so much for being here today. So, let me start with you, Hazel. I wanted to start with a question that would really sort of get to the heart of this conversation, because while the research gives us the what, your work and your story can help us to understand the how. So, what are some of the most important things that the Muslim community should know and do to truly support new converts and to ensure that they don't feel alienated from their faith? And on the flip side, what are some of the challenges that new converts often face that other Muslims might not even realize or fully understand? For example, things like navigating relationships with non Muslim family members. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Assalamu alaikum, peace and blessings, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me here, Dalia. It's amazing to have that research, absolutely important and so critical. Again, peace and blessings with everyone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. قال ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Those questions are absolutely critical because when it means to the broader Muslim community, really is fervent and excited to help the new converts, right? And people who, new Muslims, new Shahada, some communities also use the term new Shahadas, in order to not alienate them from their faith. But one of the first things I'd like to mention is to understand that the convert journey is incredibly sacred, and it is also an ongoing process. And so we have this idea within the Muslim community that when one becomes Muslim, the Shahada is the moment, right? But there is this understanding that taking the Shahada is not the end goal, declaring the Shahada is not the end goal, but rather we should see it as the beginning of this path, of becoming Muslim, of adhering to, that God is one and that we follow in the footsteps of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And so with this becoming Muslim being more than just a Shahada moment, there is this continual unfolding of identity, of theology, of belonging, of spiritual embodiment. And we also need to remember and understand the seerah, the biography of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in that he nurtured the early Muslims and he nurtured the early community. And how he did that was he walked with converts in this unfolding of all the things. And how did he do that? And the early community, it was with patience, it was with love, it was with mentorship, and it was with presence. And so another piece that is so critical to understand is that converts are not a blank slate. And I say that because, yes, when someone converts to Islam, our sins are forgiven, our slates are wiped clean, and that we get to start afresh. We have this theologically within our deen. Hajj does the same thing, right? Where our slate is wiped clean. But understand that the wiping clean of sins does not mean that their whole personality and where we come from and who we are, it does not mean that we're also erased, right? So when I took my Shahada as an 18-year-old, I went through an identity crisis because there was this assumption that I needed to be something else than being a Puerto Rican and Mexican teenager graduating from high school, right? So there's that one piece, and that understanding the sanctity, and that the Shahada isn't just that moment. We also ask converts, oh, what's your Shahada story? Something I like to do with converts, and maybe it's because I'm a convert, I feel a little more comfortable, but I often ask once I get to know them is, what's keeping you Muslim? Because research also shows there's a revolving door. People convert to Islam and they leave right back out because of the issues within the broader Muslim community. Another thing that is so important for us to do, the broader Muslim community to do in order to not alienate, is really, really, really creating these safe spaces. And these spaces with emotional support, with cultural support, and with spiritual safety. oftentimes converts will feel like guests in a masjid, or they'll feel like guests in a community center, and not really feeling like they're genuinely a part of the community. So there should be this intentional welcoming infrastructures that happen, such as mentorship programs, such as convert circles, inclusive programming that doesn't assume that everyone grew up with the same cultural religious literacy. So as a former Catholic, I'll say, like, as a former Catholic, there would be assumptions about my former practice that were very Protestant, right? Because of what the broader narrative is of what Christianity is. So I'd be like, well, no, I was Catholic and from a Latino background, so it's expressed a little differently. So just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that he made us into nations and tribes so that we get to know one another, Muslim converts have this tendency to get to know other people, like learning about other people's backgrounds and whatnot. The same thing should be given to converts as well. Just know a little bit. Don't make stereotypes and assume things about people. So again, there's this welcoming infrastructure that I think is so important for our broader Muslim community. And I would love to quote Dr. Umar Farooq Abdullah. He has a wonderful article called Islam and the Cultural Imperative. And one of the things that he mentions in this article is that Islam is not a culturalist religion. It is a religion that elevates and purifies cultures. And so, oftentimes from my own experience, there'd be this notion of, oh, you can't be Latina and Muslim because of all the stereotypes that were made about Latinos. Whereas actually there is so much within my culture that really aligns with Latinidad. And subhanAllah, even my background right here, this background is from Andalusia, Al-Andalus, right? And so that, Spain over 800 years was a Muslim majority country. And the last piece, one of the other pieces I'd like to mention is, as the broader Muslim community, we really have to move beyond the tokenization and romanticization of converts. Now, I remember one convert, I got so excited that she took Shahada. It was one of my in-laws. And I hugged her and I was like, oh my God, please pray for me. Like, all your sins are wiped clean. Like, you're like a baby. Like, pray for me, pray for me. And she was so overwhelmed because there I was as a convert, but I was still tokenizing her, right? Oh, you're so much better than me, right? Like this language between raised and born Muslims using it with converts, like, oh, you're so much better than me because you chose this faith. No, we all have to have that moment where we choose this faith, right? So converts are not PR pieces. We're not rescue stories. And we're definitely not mascots for dawah brochures. And I say that because there have been stories of individuals who will take on converts as like their pets, as like their personal project. No, we're not animals. We're human beings who are trying to belong to this ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so we need this, we need this sincere companionship and respect, not celebrity treatment the day that one takes Shahada. And I also really want to uplift that we are full human beings. We grieve, we heal, we parent, we unlearn, we search. We know this. But I mentioned that because grieving within the convert community, the convert Muslim community, can be so difficult. And I say that because, subhanAllah, one of my dear friends, Iman Manigat, who is the Rabata convert care coordinator, and I've heard it from others as well. But individuals whose non-Muslim relatives pass away, and the Muslim community, broader Muslim community, doesn't offer even condolences. Subhanallah, the Prophet ﷺ, when there was a procession of a Jewish man, and he who had passed away, a funeral procession of a Jewish man who had passed away, the Prophet ﷺ stood up, and the companion said, Ya Rasulullah, he was just a Jew. And he said, was he not a soul? So where are we embodying that as an ummah, that we are embodying that seerah, that sunnah, that practice, that is a human soul. So when our converts are grieving, we should be reaching out. Yes, it's okay to say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. It's okay. Bismillah. And so again, there's the other important piece as well is to teach, right? Not police, and teach that there is a fine line between sincere guidance and public shaming. And so there is so much knowledge that is out there. And it is so important to have these Islam 101 classes, but also understand that it is important to uplift and understand and how to live. And one other piece, I would love to bring up this book called Project Lena, Let me take off my background. This book is absolutely incredible. I recommend it to converts as well as anybody who mentors converts. It is called Bringing Our Whole Selves to Islam. It is absolutely a wonderful, wonderful resource for anyone who works with converts in the broader Muslim community. And again, some of the things that is difficult for converts to deal with that people may not understand is navigating family tensions. Again, I mentioned the identity crisis. Linguistic literacy. I've been Muslim over 20 years. I do this too. Sometimes I'll say the Arabic terms and forget my audience, right? And like, let's translate these Arabic terminology because not everybody's familiar with it. Also understand that converts deal with a lot of loneliness and lack social infrastructure. And there's also a lot of undoing of internalized misconceptions that happened. Even though I have been Muslim for many years, I still deal with Catholic guilt, right? Like, this is just the reality of my own life. So, understanding that we have our own internalized misconceptions and we are whole human beings who are trying to make it in this ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hazel. That was a wonderful answer. And a lot of people in the chat seem to agree. I loved the question, what's keeping you Muslim? You really helped bring to light sort of both the emotional and practical dimensions of the convert experience, especially those challenges that are often overlooked in broader community conversations about American Muslims. I'd like to now bring our next panelist, Nahila Morales. Nahila, as you know, Latinos are one of the fastest growing demographics among American Muslims. And many of these new Muslims are also converts, navigating both a new faith and at times unfamiliar cultural spaces within the Muslim community. Can you share some of the specific successes and also some of the challenges that Latino Muslims face as converts, whether it's language barriers, community acceptance, family dynamics, or leadership representation? What should we know if we want to better support this rapidly growing segment of our Ummah?
Thank you so much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Subhanallahi wa bihamdi wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon all of you. Hazel, that was amazing, mashallah. A lot of points that I'm going to briefly touch on. Mashallah, you covered. And in a nutshell, you were, mashallah, touched on some of the most sensitive topics that oftentimes are either swept under the rug or we're shy to speak about, both as a community and as converts ourselves. We've been around the block now for quite some time, and so we have had the honor and also the difficulty to see the challenges that our convert communities do face. Some of the challenges that I would like to mention is that the family acceptance, the rejection of immediate family. Oftentimes their ignorance does not allow them to understand exactly what's happening to their child, their niece, their nephew, and so on and so forth. And I want to put out a question out here. Just imagine for a slight second that your child comes home, that we're all Muslim. Your child comes home and says, as of today, I am Christian, or I am going to be practicing Hindu, or I'm a Buddhist. Just simmer that in for a couple seconds, and I'm going to give you some time for that, because as a mother of one, he's now 20, and when I converted, he was an infant, a child. He was a little over one. I can't fathom. I don't have, as a convert, as a Muslim, in my mind, my heart aches to even think that he would do such a thing. But for us converts, we have done exactly that. And we go to our homes and say, guess what? Today you're going to see me with this and you're going to have to accept it. And so a lot of our families, especially our Latino families, do not understand because it's very foreign. And unfortunately, the media has played a key role to the ignorance that already is under their belt. And so um, it's very important to understand that every convert has their own story, has their own baggage, comes with their own difficulties. Not everybody learns Al-Fatiha on a day, on a month, on a year. Everybody's different. And so for us to be put in a basket per se, and just because we have a title of convert, does not really resonate well with our community. And that's something that we should really stop. The other thing is that every family is obviously different, right? I come from a very dysfunctional family as a Latina. And what I mean by that is I grew up in a group home and in a foster home. And so my story is completely different than Hazel's, where she comes from a very nurturing home and a very loving family. So that family acceptance it never happens, or sometimes it happens very gradually. So we as converts have to be very patient. And I want to share a story. I have one gentleman who converted about a year ago, and he's Mexican. And it took him a year and a half to actually finally tell his mother that he converted. And his biggest fear was that she, for one, would not understand. Number two, that because he's only 19, 20, he would be kicked out of his home, which happens more often than people actually know in our community. And so when I asked him, what happened, what made you tell her that day? He's like, oh, well, the day before they were drinking, and my mother was so happy that I don't drink. And so I felt like it was a leeway for me to actually tell her why I don't drink. And he didn't expect her reaction, and she took it very well and actually was very proud of the fact that he doesn't drink, number one. And number two, he's like, okay, well, now you have to teach me of what this entails. What do I need to do differently? And he said, I'm still your son. I'm still Mexican. And I can still eat tacos and salsa and enchiladas. I'm just a better version of myself, and I'm working to be a better person. So that's just one example of what the fear that happens to some of our community members. And now he also expressed, every time I disappear here on Wednesday nights, I'm actually at the soup kitchen feeding the homeless. So there's so many dynamics that happens when converts are afraid to actually tell their families. The other thing I briefly want to talk about, challenges when it comes to stereotyping and discrimination, that happens within our community. Oftentimes we're seen as less knowledgeable, and that takes a toll on many of our convert community members, because even though I was listening to Sister Dalia about the research, more upcoming converts have bachelor's, master's, and PhDs. And so for you to think that just because I am not a fluent Arab speaker, or just because I converted, a year, 5 years, 10 years ago, I am less of, that's something that we really need to be careful, because the revolving door that Hazel spoke about is very real. There is some numbers out there that 7 out of 10 converts end up leaving Islam. And so that's very dangerous. The isolation that Hazel spoke about, for me, as I've seen many of the converts, is the language, the difference of the language, right? Many of the newer Latinos that convert, that perhaps don't even speak English. I do teach a 101 class here in New Jersey for undocumented Spanish-speaking individuals. And so they don't even speak English. I took a gentleman, one of my students, the night of Arafat. I invited him to come and break fast with us, even though he wasn't fasting. I wanted him to see what it looked like, the mosque and the community. And if it wasn't just the couple people that are at my table, he would have probably felt lost, right? The other thing is the cultural adjustment. There's a cultural adjustment that happens. I'm going to have to wrap up because I just got a cue. The loss of support system. Oftentimes, we also lose support system, friends and family, and that's some of the challenges that people don't realize. that you have a whole family or you have friends that start dropping like flies the day that you convert. As far as success, I would say, we find identity and belonging. There are positive experiences within our communities for the converts. To understand our purpose is so important and vital for us as converts. And so Islam does provide this. And finding that personal connection or renewing that connection with God, because that's the other thing. Oftentimes as converts, our community thinks that we're just learning about God, but we've always had a relationship with God. It's just been different, and we've had to taper it a little bit. So I need to say that, because oftentimes people think that we have no relationship with God at all, and that's not necessarily true. And I want to end with, Islam is not for us to be perfect. It has never told us to be perfect as converts. Islam heals, it heals the broken. So it is important for us to see each other as possibly individuals that are looking for healing, and Islam is providing that, inshallah.
Thank you so much, Nahila, for highlighting the important and often under-recognized experiences of Latino Muslims, and thank you for sharing that beautiful story, and also for reminding us how identity and culture can all intersect with faith in such meaningful ways. I'd like to now turn to our final panelist, Dr. Jihad Safir. Dr. Safir, I have two questions for you. I'll start with the first one. Can you share from your experiences what it is that draws people, especially new converts, to Islam?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. So first of all, I want to acknowledge that, and it's not to boast or boast myself above others, but I acknowledge I've been Muslim. In my entire life, I was born Muslim, born jihad. What was in the mind of my father naming me jihad? We'll have to ask him that. But I come to this conversation, I mentioned that because I come to this conversation really open to learn. And I admit that I have blind spots when it comes to the experience of the convert. And so it's important for our communities who are giving this convert care during this time to consistently and constantly check on those who are converted into Islam, asking the questions, is there anything that you need, or, can you suggest ways in which we can serve you better? So, to have a community that places themselves in the position as if they know exactly what the convert needs without consulting the convert, I think places themselves in a position of, where the convert will eventually drop out of that space. But the time is right. I think this is a window of opportunity that we have to make sure that we equip ourselves in order to provide that necessary care for the convert. What we're seeing is that, especially in the inner city, I'll give you an example. I went to the bank recently, and the one of the bankers, one of the workers said, asked me if I was Muslim, and she says, "Yeah, I want to come to the Muslim around the Muslims because I've been listening to an artist named Kevin Gates, right?" And another incident happened where I was at the store, and this is in the inner city, predominantly Black communities. So I was at the store and the same comment was made. So you see that people, with the impact of mainstream media, I always go back to when I was young. I was so excited to hear Islam being mentioned, for example, on a Lauryn Hill album. I also was excited to know Mike Tyson became a Muslim. I saw Mike Tyson at the masjid. You know, what that did to my Muslim identity, I mean, that it worked wonders on my Muslim identity. Seeing Muhammad Ali at the masjid, and you hear these stories about people converting into Islam through means of, like, for example, the autobiography of Malcolm X. So we have to recognize also, we see a lot of, especially African Americans becoming Muslim, they're seeing Islam being represented in mainstream, media. But many a times when they come into the masjid, you have Muslims who aren't necessarily equipped to accommodate the new Muslim. You have communities that are really struggling financially. You have many communities, especially in predominantly African American communities, where they have unsalaried imams, So on one end, you have a lot of representation, mainstream media through sports, some of the major sports figures. I mean, at the masjid, I've prayed next to Jaylen Brown, highest paid NBA player at this moment. So this is doing a lot. But when we have communities that really lack the training and support, then there becomes a problem. We have to acknowledge a few things. So you have many coming into Islam, but what the impact of gentrification, in the community, especially in the inner city. I would like to know more statistics in regards to gentrification and its impact, which leads to, relocation, and then also instability and, financial challenges. And I would see it as an individual who studies a lot dealing with the identity formation and identity development. I would say that there's not enough identity supports within the community, especially when you have Salatul Jumu'ah based communities where they're meeting once a week. You have the new Muslim or the convert, they're coming into Islam with competing identities. And many of these other identities that they have more supports for these other identities, and they have more frequency, more frequent meetings to trigger these other identities. So this is what we're seeing, that in the community, we need orientation so people aren't many times properly integrated into the Muslim space. What we've done is we started providing orientations on how to really navigate the environment. And in these orientations, we also warn about other community members. Unfortunately, we have community members in many of our communities that, they run the new convert or the convert, the new Muslim away. So it's always a challenge with some of the individuals who kind of go rogue and do their own thing and have their own ideas on how to come to deal with the convert. So you need a committee that deals directly with the new with the new community member. I would close with saying, from the inner city standpoint, it takes a lot of resources dealing with the new convert, and it takes a lot of creativity. What you have, especially with African Americans coming into the community, they're coming usually through the storefront mosque, the storefront masjid, which isn't always equipped with the resources to care for the convert. You have unsalaried staff, which leads to inconsistency. There may be needs for a chaplain in the, especially in the inner city communities. They need a chaplain, and also not enough resources to really focus completely on the new Muslim. There needs to be maybe retreats or more classes, dynamic programming, more enriching programming for the new convert. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless our new converts, and may Allah bless our communities to be better equipped in order to accommodate the needs of the new convert. Thank you all for offering me this space to learn.
Thank you, Dr. Safir. I know we want to get to the panelist questions as well, but maybe if we could quickly go over the second question that I had for you. It is based on the fact that our latest analysis shows that about 50% of Muslim converts are African American, with many being older than the general Muslim population. Yet we also see a decline in the number of African American mosques, according to the mosque study by Dr. Islamophobia. Based on your work and deep engagement with these communities, can you share any insight on this apparent contradiction?
Yeah, I would definitely say it's some of the things that I named, you have on one end where there's a lot of representation in the mainstream media, which is that initial attraction where people's role models in the mainstream media are becoming Muslim, from hip hop artists to NBA players, sports athletes, so on and so forth. But at the same time, the communities, when they come to the actual community, the community most of the time isn't necessarily equipped and does not have the programming and the frequency of programming in order to to meet the needs of the person converting. What's important is that the community provides the psychological needs support. When the new convert or when the convert comes into the community, there's a sense of belonging that they need to feel. There's also competence supports that they need to feel. You have often where you may have a community member, and then here comes maybe someone who is a veteran at this Islam, and they want them to jump to veteran status overnight. So they began telling them about their dress, about they want to teach them the latest, from the latest Arabic words that they learn. They want to teach it to them. The hadith, they want to bring in the most ambiguous hadith, or they bring in the most controversial hadith and they begin to share with them, and they begin to bring in these lofty concepts of aqidah and so on and so forth, and tajweed and pronunciation and so on and so forth, before the new Muslim really gets their feet wet. And so they should go gradually. So I think just untrained community, not necessarily always equipped to deal with the new Muslim. But I want to just before a lot of people are coming into Islam and they've been they're searching. They find themselves where they're leading. They just want to they want to avoid a miserable ending, in life. So they feel like Islam can, it's telling you not to drink. What they've seen through their relatives and the people that are in their lifestyle, they're like, I want an alternative lifestyle that doesn't lead towards a miserable ending. So this is what they're searching for, and they come to the masjid and search just for, a lifestyle that offers them more solace and a peace of mind, you know.
Thank you so much, Dr. Safir. We'll move into our audience Q&A section. If you have any questions for any of the panelists, feel free to drop them into the Q&A box. We'll start off with the first one that I see here. Where do you see gaps in where converts are underutilized in our communities or underappreciated, minimized in society at large? And what are some simple strategies you think could be used to remedy these gaps in decision making and representation? Would anyone like to tackle that one?
Can you ask the question one more time?
Yeah, so it is, where do you see gaps in where converts are underutilized in our communities or underappreciated in society at large? And what are some simple strategies you think that could be used to remedy these gaps in decision making and representation?
That's a
I
really
don't want to talk too. Okay, okay.
no, subhanAllah. I
Please,
think
please
that's
go.
mashallah. I think that's each of us could answer that question.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Number one is not having that tokenization that often can happen within Muslim institutions, unfortunately. And so really it's the question that the masjid, the mosque, or the Muslim-led institution should ask is, what can this person's experience and their skill set bring to better our Muslim community? And so I think that these gaps are because there isn't an understanding of one another. From masajid, I read in the chat, right? Many masajid are often mono-ethnic, right? Where we actually use the language. I'm going to the Hyderabadi masjid, or I'm going to the Bosnian masjid, right? Like we have this language, unfortunately, within the American Muslim community. And so the importance of how that particular institution, how to make it more welcoming, would be to have conversations with converts and how to have this space more welcoming so that we don't use language like this masjid or this masjid, right? This mono-ethnic group. And also one thing I would suggest for converts, it can be very difficult because I've been in those spaces, is also just like asserting yourself and just like being in there and just being like, I'm here, I want it to be better. And unfortunately, sometimes it has been where our families have been disrespected in masajid. That sometimes is the catalyst, and I pray that that doesn't happen to anyone. Definitely has happened to my mother and my own family members, where I'm always like, can I take her to this masjid, or do I have to take her to this one because she's about to get yelled at for XYZ, right? So really great question, but the question should also be for the institutions to think, what is the value of having a convert in our space? They can help us see our blind spots. And we can just do better overall as a community.
If I may add, thank you, Hazel, mashallah. I think it takes us back to the ayah they shared with us earlier, right? To get to know one another. Oftentimes we don't know the talents that the converts can bring to our communities, the skills, the education. And so we're not allowing them to sit at the table, and like you said, if it's not you or myself or someone that I'm here, and I want to be part of this because I am part of this community and I want to grow with this community and I want to make this community better. So sometimes it takes us speaking up and speaking out and bringing others with us as well, because we may know our convert community better than the community. And so we know the talents and the skilled and the education that these converts have. They're looking for an accountant for the masjid or what have you. We have one, or a PhD researcher or what have you. And sometimes it's lost opportunity within our community at broad.
Yeah, and I want to just keep emphasizing this training for the community. The community has to consistently raise their level of knowledge when it comes to dealing with the convert. You have to and then making sure those people, you don't have the people who go rogue. You have people, they're like jumping at the bit to kind of to correct someone. They want to kind of spout their intellectual advancement in fiqh, or they want to immediately, they see, but what I would tell my community all constantly is like, that's not the first step. You see someone that you say, hey, this person's doing wrong. You have to make sure, get to know them, develop rapport, develop a relationship first. How are you correcting them and you don't even know their name? You have no idea where they grew up, what they had to go through in order to get to the environment. So why would you correct the person? You have no idea what they had to go through to get to the environment. So I would definitely say training for the community and more surveys. We have to be able to not assume. The board should not be sitting in a room deciding for the community without knowing what the community wants. So this is important, that many times we assume, and we assume what people need without going to the people and asking them what they need. So training and also survey the community.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. At Embrace, we actually I came up with a convert sensitivity training. And so the name kind of strikes hurtfully at some community members or board members. Can you change the name? Can we do? Well, no, it's a convert sensitivity training to train to unlearn and learn how to treat and deal with this convert, because we don't all come from the same walks of life. You cannot treat us the same and just put us in a basket and say, okay, you're a convert, you're going to be doing this, that, and third. You don't know if they have learning impairments. You don't know where they came from. And so it's so important to actually get to know your community members. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to also offer that at Rabata, we do have a convert care training as well. And it's so beautiful when people want to step up and be mentors to converts. But then when they have us all in again, that blank slate mentality, oh, they're a blank slate and now they're just converts, as if their life stories, our life stories are still not impacting us, is really detrimental to the betterment of the Muslim community. So it's so important, have those good intentions, but also understand that there's a lot of unlearning, just like Naila mentioned.
And
Thank
if
you.
I
I want
may,
to
sorry.
I want to quickly just say, okay, it's the balance between, you have ta'aleem, right? You have these communities. I mean, we love, especially the imams, we love ta'aleem. We want to teach and study all day, right? And we want to teach what we know all day, but what we're learning is that, religion, first of all, is better caught, not taught. You have to, have environments where people are embodying these principles instead of always, spouting these principles from the minbar. So in regards to religious education, we see that disseminating it from a point of where you're the only one speaking, or from the minbar, from the point of the singular teacher speaking, is not always as effective than having a person come into a community where people are embodying kindness, embodying these principles without quoting the principles a lot of times. So ta'aleem has to be kind of re-examined, but also we have the concept in Islam, taysir. It's really offering this easy time, where people can come in and relax. You don't have to come in and where you can't be yourself in the environment. Come to the environment. Hey, you got tattoos, and I'm not going immediately. Hey, you cursed, with those tattoos. The person has earrings in their ear, but you don't know what this person has been through. That they have earrings in their ear, but they're here. So the person is kind of, they don't know the assalamu alaikum properly. They might use salam alaikum, and they may mispronounce something. Don't become an Arabic snob. I used to be an Arabic snob correcting people, akhi, the kha. People, let people relax. So ta'aleem, the balance between ta'aleem and a new approach, we need to re-examine the approach of ta'aleem and how we teach and disseminate the deen, but also offering that taysir, that easy time where bring people relief environment. Sorry, I'm talking too much.
No worries. For the sake of time, we should move on to the next question, although those were some amazing points. Another question I see here is, what is being done to build bridges or relationships with Jews and Christians to make it much easier for converts to see the overlap and the families to see that there is no threat?
I'm gonna go super quick because nobody's picking up the mic, but and we got a lack of time. But we recently had, one of the brothers, he accepted Islam during the Ahmadiyyat times, where it's like, hey, you come in, you demean the Bible, you demean something, and I'm like, these are different times. We have to make sure that, especially the person converting from Christianity, they still have some love in their hearts towards their Christian relatives and also towards the Christian lifestyle. So you don't bring them in an environment, and you just well away on your talk about Christianity as a religion, and bring up the Jews that these are Zionists, they pigs, this, blah, blah, this, and that. You have to also have sensitivity that these are different times. You have to make sure you contextualize your approach in your dawah. And I don't think these are the times where you demean the Bible, where you demean Christianity, and so on and so forth.
I think we need to focus on our commonality. I think it's so important as far as dawah goes in our families. I remember one of the first times I went to Mexico, one of my uncles said, "Why did you go look for God so far?" And I said, "Well, what part of Latin America is Jesus from?" Uh, and he was quiet, and we just started talking about Jesus and how that plays a key role in my life, and how I didn't have to let go of Jesus and Mary. On the contrary. And so to point that out in the Quran and for him to actually read it made such a big difference. And so you have to find that commonality. We have so much similarities, right, within Islam, the Abrahamic faiths. And so when we point our differences, we get nowhere but debate. And so when we focus on, listen, I love Jesus. Jesus is part of my life. Jesus is part of my religion. I didn't have to let go of Jesus. As a matter of fact, that's one of the main reasons why I said, oh, it's complete. Allah is one, God is one, and Jesus is here. So I'm good. As far as him being a prophet and him being a messenger, but not God or three in one, which I always had a problem with. But I think it's really focusing on your similarities, finding that sweet spot. And the dawah has a lot to do with it, the way you actually deliver that message. It's not about debating all the time. It really isn't. You don't get anywhere oftentimes because people are not ready to really learn about what you have to say.
I really appreciate this question, and Dr. Jihad and Naila for your answers, because with Islamophobia, there is this internalized Islamophobia. We're always explaining ourselves, and really forgetting that there's so much commonality, right? So, for example, at Rabata during December, we have a Maryam alayha salam program in December, right? And so we've done it for a few years, and it's like picking different aspects of the life of the Virgin Mary, may God be pleased with her, and also in the life of Isa, of Jesus, peace be upon him. And so it's really important. And that program, for example, is a teaching, but it's also just to educate our own relatives who may be Christian and celebrating the holiday season in December. So these things are really important to highlight. And even for myself, right, when me covering and wearing hijab was something that my family just couldn't wrap their head around. And so I was like, well, what are the images of the Virgin Mary? She's covered. I want to be like the Virgin Mary, and it's in the Quran. And so that, for example, for my Mexican and Puerto Rican grandparents and relatives, they're like, oh, they get it, right? Like they get why I cover. Yes, it's in the Quran, but to understand that I also am choosing to cover like the Virgin Mary, right? Like honoring someone culturally who I really love and respect, and obviously as a Muslim as well.
Thank you all. Another question that I see here is, can a community overcorrect, putting converts in a position where they are not prepared? The brother Ali the rapper discusses how he was made an imam when he was not prepared. Is this a more prevalent issue these days?
Yes, it's very unfortunate that this happens far too often. And I see it, I'm not going to say names, but it was a couple that recently converted, and he was literally put on a national convention, and his wife actually spoke to me, and she felt very overwhelmed. So it does happen, and we need to stay away from that. I actually was put to speak about 9/11 as a new convert. Yes, that's my story, but I wasn't prepared for it. And so we need to be very cautious as a community to not tokenize, like Hazel's saying, our new converts. We need to make sure that they're getting the proper education, and not overfed either, because sometimes they're not ready to go on to the next step. They're looking for socialization, or they're looking for community, or they're looking to heal. And so it has to be in bits and pieces. It does happen more often than it should, and this is something that we need to be careful.
Yeah, I know, in identity studies is that, there's a phases that the identity goes through, which it ends up settling in a phase of like integration, where it's integrated into the self, which takes time. I mean, you begin, and we don't realize a lot of times, even like these major events, war happening, it does something to your identity. And then also you have 9/11, what it did to the Muslim identity, they have to settle. I know the African American community going through, especially the Muslim community, uh, during that George Floyd time, you have people where they had to kind of go through this process of, identity integration, which, they were unsettled at first, and then they had to have a space to vent, and then eventually the identity, reached the integration point. So there's phases that I think the Muslim community has to be aware of, and they have to allow people the space to reach identity integration. And the community is a part of helping the person, or guiding the person towards this integration. But it takes time. It takes time. We putting out people the first year they come, new Muslims, and you ask them when did they convert? They like last month, you know, or even 2 months ago. No, it takes time. You have to allow them to come in and allow their identity to settle and go through a certain process before putting them in front of in front of the Muslim community on a big platform. So I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. That identity piece is absolutely critical. And there's also this importance of understanding that they're still breaking old habits, right? Still breaking old habits and bad habits. And, someone who is immediately put or thrust into public speaking or public spaces while they're still trying to navigate this new identity, this new faith practice, right? This is a relationship with God that has a lot of political implications around the world, right? It's overwhelming. It's so overwhelming. And so it's so important to just really allow people to have that space, not just be there that first day of the Shahada, but really also taking care of them, right? Following the example of the Ansar and the Muhajirun, really, really following that example, right? Where the Ansar welcomed the Muhajirun with open arms, with shared resources, with deep love, with understanding, with presence, and really ensuring that our institutions as well, as I mentioned earlier, that our institutions as well are convert friendly, so that there is this gradual process, inshallah.
Thank you. I know we're running out of time, but maybe we could get to one more question here. Can we expand upon different experiences of converts based on gender and ethnicity? I know we touched on ethnicity a bit, so maybe we could discuss really quickly about gender.
So I can chime in here. I think the question is asking, how do people, based on their gender ethnicity, experience embracing Islam, and the way that the community kind of takes them and responds to them? Really good questions. This particular study does not deal with their immediate experience when they embraced Islam. I think our panel can better expound on anecdotally how folks have experienced our community and entering Islam based on their gender and ethnicity. Just to reiterate the data, half of Muslim converts are women, half are men. So it's not one gender over another being, drawn into Islam. And as far as ethnicity, Black Muslims make up half of Muslim converts. And the fastest growing segment of the Muslim conversion sort of demographic are Latino Muslims.
I'm just going to say one point, and my point is help converts learn Deen more than you try to help them to get married. I mean, I've met sisters convert one day, the next day they're like, "We want to get married," because there's this mentality of, oh, then she'll be taken care of, and almost like it can feel like a burden. People are like, oh, I'm made to feel like a burden because the next day after I take my shahada, I'm expected to get married. Again, everybody has their own experiences with marriage, with searching to get married. Some women and men get married right early on in their convert journey. Other people wait. It varies across the board. But the importance is allow converts to be ibadallah, allow converts to be Muslim, allow converts to be ibad ar-Rahman, dealing with their own nafs and issues and all the things before you got to bring somebody else into the picture. That's my advice.
Thank you so much, Hazel. I love that. Yeah, if there's one more point, we can quickly get to it.
All right. Well, yeah. So this is the importance of uplifting leadership, and a part of that leadership is a committee that specifically deals with the convert, the Muslim community. As we know, there are many undergrounds that exist within the Muslim community, and it's really protecting the new Muslim from the undergrounds of the Muslim community and keep them above ground with the committee that's constantly caring for them, before the underground gets them.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I know there's a couple other questions, but we are unfortunately out of time. So I just wanted to close by saying thank you all so much for joining us today for this important and deeply meaningful conversation. And a heartfelt thank you to our panelists, Hazel Gomez, Nahila Morales, and Dr. Jihad Safir, for sharing your wisdom, experiences, and powerful reflections. And of course, thank you to Dalia for grounding us in the research that helps to shape and inform these critical conversations. You will all be receiving a follow-up email in the coming days with additional resources related to today's discussion, including research from ISPU, support tools for converts, and ways to stay connected with our work, in addition to the recording of this webinar. On behalf of all of us at ISPU, thank you again for being part of today's conversation and for your continued commitment to building an inclusive and compassionate Muslim community. Take care, and we hope to see you again at a future.